Hello and welcome to Until We Arise. My name is Rachel, and here's where we bridge a divided people to loving community, empowering resources, and a compassionate Christ.
Hi, I'm Vettel, and I am the co-founder and CFO of Until We Arise. And our vision is to build a thriving global community of women who combat injustice and oppression through love and compassion.
And
Hi.
hi. Today we are recording live from Los Angeles and
Tijuana.
Baja California in the house.
Woo-hoo.
And we're super excited to be here. We have a very special guest that you guys are going to love. This is the kind of episode that is going to transform your life. So you don't want to miss it. Stay, share it, connect with people, get them on board with this. I feel emotional just in preparing for it. So, Vero, would you tell us a little bit more about our guest?
Yeah, so I'll share very briefly. Um, this guest is actually someone who helped me get into the social service realm. I was starting to have a heart for it, and I remember sharing it with some people. And then one day, she messaged me and was like, "Friend, they're hiring at my job. Send me your resume." Sorry, there's a helicopter. Um,
It's okay. You're in Tijuana. We'll excuse it.
es la migra. Sorry, y'all. But for real. but I
It's for real. That's what's hard. It's for real.
but anyway, so she was like, "Send me a resume, friend," and I was like, "Yeah, I'll see." And then she was like, so long story, she was like hounding me, like, "Send me a resume, send me a resume." And I was just like, "I'm not really looking for like a new job right now." And she's like, "Trust me, this is the job for you." So finally, I sent her my resume, and she was able to put in a word for me, and I was interviewed. And once I was interviewed, I realized that this really was the job for me. And so she helped me get my job at St. Joseph Center. So it was just such a blessing, and she's been a blessing overall. She's been a great friend. I didn't realize like how much about her I didn't know when I met her, but then as we just got to know each other and just seeing her overcome so many things has been such a blessing. And so,
Mhm.
without any
And she's
further
a
ado,
beast.
she
She's
is
a
a
beast.
she's
She's a
hardcore.
beast. She be lifting weights and like hardcore squatting. I'm on
At like five
like
in the
she's
morning, I'm like
5 in the
rolling out of
morning.
bed on a good day at 5. If not, I'm definitely still in my dreams at 5. On a good day, I'm at 5 waking
It's an ungodly hour.
up. But so to introduce to you guys, we are having today Belen Gonzalez, and she is a
Yay.
licensed clinical social worker. And she's also a practicing clinician in community mental health. She's currently working on her PhD in counseling and will be starting at full time. Sorry, she'll be starting full time at Life Pacific University's psychology department. She's also married and has 4 children ranging from ages 8 to 21. That's a big range. And her and her husband have been serving in youth and young adult ministry for over 10 years and have recently started serving yet again in young adult ministry at their church, New Life Moreno Valley. So, why don't you join me in welcoming Belen?
Yay.
Hey,
Welcome, Belen.
Hello, ladies. What a warm welcome.
we love you. We're glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm
Yeah,
glad to
we're
be here.
we're very honored to have you here. Very honored.
Mhm.
And just seeing the more I was saying, I told you off camera, but I was just like, Vero like speaks highly of you and your significance in her life. And I know that we wouldn't have started until we arise had that seed not been planted at that time. And it's all of us working in our part, doing our part, even with the little things that bring us to where we are. So it's an honor to have you.
It is.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor to be here. I think very highly of both of you ladies. And Vero, I recall that about you coming into St. Joseph. And I will tell you this, when that position opened, nobody else came to mind but you. It was just your
Mhm.
face right there. And I was like, this is
Mhm.
perfect. It's a perfect fit. And I'm so glad that you loved it and that you got, it was so rewarding for you. But I knew in my heart that was for you.
I remember you were like, I kept delaying. I was like, oh, I'll send it to her later. I was like, I'm not really looking right now. And you're like, send me your resume. And I was like, okay. But it was such a blessing.
I was like, Vero, stop playing around.
Seriously. But I'm grateful. I'm grateful you insisted and you didn't let down. So I appreciate it.
So I have a question before we get into our interview questions. Like, Belen, how do you do it all? You are getting your PhD in counseling. You are practicing, like you said, like a therapist for a nonprofit, basically is what you said, right? You are going into Life Pacific as a like a full-time, like in August. You do youth, I mean, you're doing young adult ministry. You have 4 kids, and then you make it look good. Like, how do you, and you work out, like, how do you do this?
With lots and lots of grace from Jesus. I think, interestingly enough, a lot of those things are kind of connected. A lot of those
Mm,
things kind of inform each other. Like being in a PhD helps me be a better clinician. Learning about humanity and people helps me be a better parent. Um,
mm,
young working ministry with young adults, it's really just relational. So I think a lot of those things kind of bleed into each other.
Mhm.
Um, but also like more tangible advice. I have a lot of support. I have a very supportive and loving husband who just kind of like bends and sways to the season, and he shows up in different ways. So he's really been like a foundation to a lot of that success for sure.
oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
Or did you, when you were younger, did you ever imagine you'd be living this life the way you're living it now? Like being like about to have a doctorate degree, and like, is
No,
this who you pictured when you were little? What did you picture yourself as?
absolutely not. I don't know. I mean, when I was like 5, I wanted to be a doctor, like a medical doctor, right? But I don't know. I feel like a lot of kids say that. But I think with every season, God reveals a little bit more of the plan, and it's nice. It's like a surprise, and then there's hope, and then there's faith attached to it, and then there's like challenge and overcoming that challenge. Like, and every season, I feel like God surprises me with a little more, and it's been beautiful.
I think it is. Like,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Yeah, 'cause
Yeah.
sometimes I think when I don't know, when we're little, we're like, I gotta do this. This is the thing. And I gotta find my way to get there. And God's like, sounds good. How about you do the next thing I told you to do today? And I'll give you the next step. And it's like, it's not
Mm.
to say not to have goals, but it's that peace with sitting in like one step at a time, right? To
Mhm.
get to
Right.
that next place, you know? Because I know I wouldn't have started until I had no view of starting until we arise. Or like, even I was telling you about Elia's gift. Like, even this time last year, Elia's gift was not on my radar. It was just like everything felt vague. And now it's like, oh, this feels right. It's exactly where I'm supposed to be, you know? Um, that's so amazing. I don't know if you wanted to say anything about it before I ask the first question, because I'm about to get into it.
No, I'd just say like that's how the Lord works. Like you said, there's just you don't I think a lot of us are living lives today that we didn't think, like we just didn't think were part of the plan, or just like,
Mhm.
what, how did I end up here? And sometimes it's not a positive thing, right? Sometimes it's a negative
Mm.
thing, but when it's a positive thing, it's so beautiful. Like I remember one of the first weeks we got here in Tijuana, and my husband and we bought bolillo because there's a bakery right next to our church. So we got out of church, got some bolillo, and we're walking home because we live really close to church. And I'm like holding his arm, we're eating our bolillo, walking home, and I just like had this like view of the whole like scenario and realized I never would have imagined this to have been my life. Like living in Tijuana, first of all, definitely not part of my plan. I'll say that. Um, and then married to an Asian man, because that's like I've told him, I'm like, that wasn't my typical like style of guy I would go for. Like that wasn't my type, but he's totally my type. Um, and then just and then we're like living together and things like not just me, but both of us, and doing this life and going to this bilingual church and being connected. It's just like it's crazy. So yeah, it's beautiful how I think it's very smart of the Lord not to show us sometimes the whole thing, because we probably ruin it. I'd probably be with a different Asian guy living in the hood of Tijuana and not being excited about it.
That's
So,
hilarious. If the Lord had showed you, oh, it's gonna be an Asian man, be on the lookout for all the Asian men.
and then nowadays, like all the K-pop stuff, it would like, oh yeah, for sure. Like maybe I'd end up with a Korean guy. So I,
Like, calm it down. Calm it down, bro. Stop trying to make the dream happen. Trust the Lord.
yeah, it's just like man, but yeah, that like step by step, and it's so wonderful to see how.
I know. I feel like if Miguel knew the kind of woman his wife would become, he'd probably be like, "Oh no, thanks. It's too much work. I'm not ready."
I'll
It's
pass.
not what we signed up for. Because how long have you guys been together?
We've been together for 18 years. And I
Wow.
know I'm so young and beautiful. How could that be? But yes, we have.
I love
And humble. And humble.
It's a
it.
gift.
No, that's amazing. 18 years.
Wow, 18
Yeah.
years.
So, how are you different? Do you feel like you're a different person than you were 18 years ago? How are you different?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, we met when I was a teenager, still 17 when we met.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and we married really young. I was 19 when we married, which is, it was a thing, right? Like you're in the church and you marry young, at least in our church. That was appropriate for our culture, right?
Mhm.
Um, but I've definitely matured, I hope. I'm 35 now. And I think we have influenced each other very much in
Mm.
our like development, right? So I have a secure attachment now. I'm more outgoing now. I feel more secure in my projects, and I think that's direct relation to like being married to him.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And today our topic is love, right? And when we do this, like we've had conversation about friendship love, mother love, like with having lost children. Uh, we've had conversations about just mother a father's love, and we've had a lot of different conversations,
Mhm.
and so I think it's related. I mean, I love to hear that your love story is so integral to your development as an adult, and that's really beautiful to discuss that. Um, but today we can talk about whatever. So it's your show. What we also talk about is God's love, right? It's all of it. Because all of it comes from the Lord, he's the definition of love for us. And so wherever it goes. So my first question for you, Belen, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Our first question is love is what? What is love to you?
Mhm. So, love to me, and this is not going to sound like it's a very loving word, but love to me is healthy boundaries.
Mm,
Yes.
hmm.
And if I can elaborate on that a little bit. So,
Yeah.
boundaries, just as a simple definition, is clearly defined lines of land, right? What belongs to me and what belongs to you.
Mhm.
So, to me, healthy boundaries in a relationship is to kind of like know your stuff, right? To
Hmm.
know what belongs to you in a relationship, your feelings, your thoughts, your emotions, to be very aware and to have stewardship, right? To have responsible care for those things as you're showing up in these different relationships. Um, but it also means respecting others people's land, right?
Mm, mm, yeah.
Respecting things that are important to other people. Uh,
Hmm.
Understanding them, listening to them, being aware, um, and being very respectful. And I wish I would have talked about Miguel now because we just like hyped them up so much. But in today, I
You
would
can
like
still talk about Miguel. All of it works.
he'll still come up. He'll still come up.
Wherever it comes up, we're here for it.
um, but I think for today, and this is kind of like where my reflection and my writing went, and when I thought about this interview, I want to talk about boundaries as like intergenerational, right? Like boundaries with my parents, boundaries with my children, um, and how those help me to communicate love to them, and how to receive love from them
Mhm.
as well.
So when you speak intergenerational, you're saying for those people who, may not fully understand that, you're speaking of, like you defined it, like that relation, setting boundaries between you and your children, or your children and your parents, you and your parents, or even your children and your parents, right? Like how it crosses in between, setting healthy relationships, like with those, that age gap, right?
Yes. Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I think it's like we discussed previously how challenging that can be, and it's something that is not talked about, right? Like we do not believe that we should have boundaries. We're emotional beings, right? You have, like, I have, this goes everywhere, so I'm glad you're talking about intergenerational, right? So within
I
family,
love it.
but even with friendships, man, like I've like had to learn to develop and say, hey, hold up, like I know you're my ride or die, but like you're not my everything. Like, and I'm
Yeah.
not gonna be your everything. I can't. Like, there have to be like spaces. Like I have to be okay with you not always being there every time I call. And that's not a normal thing, right? Like
Mhm.
when I'm calling my friends, I'm like, you weren't there when I needed you. You weren't there. I could say that and put a heavy on my friendships. But sometimes God is like, I wanted to be there for you. So
Mhm.
it's healthy that they weren't there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, like, not being disappointed, but learning, okay, wait, how do I navigate that? How do I teach people that I can't be their everything?
Yeah.
And I can't expect them to be my everything either. Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't know if that, it feels like that was kind of where we were going. Is hopefully I'm
Yeah.
not too off.
No, I love that you said that, because when as we move through the interview, I want to touch back on the
You can
not.
talk on it now.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. We're not in any order. Just flow, and then I'll flow through it. Don't worry.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. So I think you're right. Sometimes we want to take the position that God has in the life of others,
Mm,
right? And it's really hard to kind of respect where God wants to step in and do His thing, right?
Mhm.
When we don't have healthy boundaries, because we
Mhm.
feel like we have to do something, like we have to get in the mix, we have to fix it, you know.
Mhm.
But you're right. Having healthy boundaries allows us to see like the hand of God in the lives of others and in the lives in our lives as well.
yeah.
Mhm.
I'm gonna follow up with the next question about a time it was challenging for you. But I think like one of the things that just like it pops up to me just off of what you're saying first is the idea of like ministry, like
Mm,
relational ministry is really challenging in that way. Like a lot of times when we don't have healthy boundaries as ministers or people who are charged with leading people,
mhm.
man, that can be really dangerous too. And I know all of us have that. Like, I want to fix you. When someone's broken, you just want to like swoop them up in your arms and be like, this is how you love Jesus. This is how, look, this is how you surrender. And sometimes like what you said, it's like you kind of you can't you got to set the boundaries, and loving them and setting those boundaries and hands off, or like, oh, this crosses the boundary, but Lord, you told me to, like learning what that, how to navigate that, and saying, okay, Lord, help me to be led by you, because he will never give us boundaries that are not sustainable. Like the Lord will give us boundaries that are sustainable. And
Mhm.
sometimes when our own flesh, we set up boundaries that are not sustainable. So we're like, no, I will never go to someone's house that I don't know. And he's like, that's your boundary. I say go into that house. And you're like, but I don't
Yeah.
want to set up my boundaries. Like, Lord, that's like, he's like, Mija, I said, listen to me. This is not your homie down the street. It's God. I'm telling you, go into that house because this is a safe boundary. I'm going to teach you how to navigate that.
Yeah.
And he does that. But it has to be the Lord. And I've learned that in ministries, friendships, and everything. Um, but
Absolutely.
hmm
So I'm sorry. I'm just like so excited. I have so many things to say.
I know. So let's jump into the question then.
Uh-huh.
Tell me about a time, because if you like, you sound like you even have all the verbiage correct on like a verbiage on boundaries. Like she is a pro. Like I'm talking to a doctoral candidate here, right? Like she is the business. And so when you talk about love being boundaries, love is making boundaries or having boundaries.
Mhm.
Have you had a time in your life when that definition of love and set and creating boundaries has been challenged? And if you don't mind sharing that with us.
Yes, absolutely. So, boundaries is something that's very tied to my relationship with God, and it's something that He is the one who taught me about boundaries in His Word, right? And He
Mm.
teaches me that boundaries are there to serve me, to protect me, to keep me from being in bondage of things or people or places, right? And these boundaries help me experience freedom, the fullness of freedom that He has intended for me, right? But as a first gen Mexican woman, boundaries is not something that we are taught. And if you try to have a boundary, it is very much challenged
The limit doesn't
by
exist.
exactly, right? The family is like, what is wrong with you? So boundaries is something that I have just began to develop with the Lord, like you said, with the guidance of God, right? And I
Mhm.
started feeling a lot of conviction about setting boundaries with my mother.
Oh Lord, there we go. She cracked it open. That is the one we do not want to talk about with Latino mommies.
Right. With my beautiful mama bear who gave me all of that beast mode strength that you see at 5 a.m. My high achiever, super smart mother, right? Like I have so many of her traits and I love her and I honor her. And
Mhm.
I know that God wanted me to develop these boundaries to show her love.
Mm.
Uh, and so, and my mom also suffers from a mood disorder. And we go back into this like cultural thing, right? She
Mhm.
was untreated and unmedicated for most of her life until um, her 40s, actually. And so my mom just recently started receiving like the medical attention and the treatment that maybe we would have received much, much sooner, right? And so because she has this mood disorder and it's been untreated, her life has had seasons of chaos, right?
Mhm.
She's not she's never been prepared or she's never been taught how to handle. But those kind of seasons of chaos bleed onto the life of her children, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we were raised in that, right? We were raised in that. But as an adult, as a married woman, and as a family that I now protect and I love too. A few years ago, my mom wanted to move in with us. She wanted to move in with our family. However, she was not taking good care of herself, and she was going through a lot of things and um, a lot of like interpersonal issues with her partner, um, and honestly, not willing to engage in treatment. And so
Mhm.
I had to very painfully tell her that she could not move in with us at that time.
Mhm.
And can you imagine telling
Mhm.
your mom in a time of need, that she can't move in with you? Like, what kind of person does that? What kind of daughter does that?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and so it was challenging for me to uphold that boundary because it didn't feel like love. It didn't feel like I was showing my mother love, and she definitely did not receive it as love, right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
felt very painful for both of us. Um, but understanding that holding that boundary was going to hopefully encourage her or motivate her to seek the help that she needed at that time, but was also going to allow me to continue to show up as a supportive daughter, because
Mm.
I knew that if she was in our space and not well, that I would probably be resentful against her. I would probably be very angry with her and no
Mm.
longer be able to show myself as a loving daughter, right? And
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
longer be able to see her strengths and her virtues and her beauty and all of these things that I inherited from her. but that I would be blindsided, right?
Mm,
And so
Mhm.
upholding that boundary was really important so that I could continue to love her, even though
Yeah.
it didn't feel that way
mm-hmm.
when it was happening.
Yeah.
I have a couple questions for you.
Yeah.
Because I feel like you jumped like 17 steps.
Oh,
Um
sorry. That's
No,
what
it's not sorry. It's just the reality, like, because it's like you're summarizing like the reality of what it's like, and you got to the end of that, and to some extent, I know you're probably still working through, because that's life and that's relationships, but like, why was it such a huge deal for you to I mean, I know you said it, but like maybe going back to childhood, like what were there like specific things that were like that really affected you? Were there times that you recall, like when she said, "Can I move back in?" That was like, I remember this, and this, like that said, okay, it's a red flag that I can't.
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, we were raised in a very strict household, and we were disciplined, you know, accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
And I do see my mom with a lot of empathy, and I think my professional side and my education has allowed me to kind of conceptualize her differently.
Yeah.
But the truth is that she wasn't a safe person when I was growing up, and that
What
and
does
that,
that mean? Yeah, for people, I'm only not trying to pry, but so that people who are in those, I'm not trying to pry, but I know that people who are in those same kind of situations won't be able to identify it. They'll say like, "No, it's my mom's not that bad. It's not that hard." It's like, "No, I should do that because I got to ride or die for my mom." You know what I mean? And not
yeah,
understanding what would be those things that say, how, what does it mean that your mom wasn't safe? Like, you're
yeah.
alive. What are you talking about? You went to college. What are you
By
talking
the
about?
grace of God. No,
I
I'm
know.
just kidding.
But like, I'll say this so it's not all on you. Like, for
Yeah.
me, um, I have a great relationship with my mom, and my mom does not have a mood disorder that I know of. Like, I'm not a clinician, so I don't know what she got. But both, like, we all are raised in trauma, right? Like, so my parents have trauma that they brought with them, and we have to work through it. Like my mom and my dad, I'll just be honest, like things that
Mhm,
I've inherited and I've had to be intentional to lean into and say,
mhm,
whoa, like I should not punch this wall. No, like I don't need to go isolate myself in depression. Like things like this that like I've had to learn to navigate out of. But
mhm,
as safe and loving as my parents were, in terms of like, no, Mija, this is a safe place for you, talk about it. And my parents were very loving. There was
mhm,
a season in my life where it didn't feel safe there because
mhm,
of sometimes the the things that they would just do and how they communicated. Yelling caused their arguments would cause anxiety for me, and I would just run. And now I've learned how to lean in, but I had to set that boundary for me for a while, and maybe that boundary changed after
mhm,
healing happened, but for me, I couldn't be in the house. And
mhm,
part of me running and escaping was to get out of the anxiety that they caused me from arguing and fighting. And I had to learn how to navigate and how to say, hey, these are the things I need. And
mhm,
so, and it's one of the things my mom was talking about recently was like, even I don't think they realized how much of a traumatic effect it had on me. Like I think they read my book, and I think my mom was like, I didn't know it was hurting you like that.
mhm,
And I was like middle schooler, already anxious about school and trying to be an overachiever. And then
mhm,
they would have whatever they're tripping on. And I would be so overwhelmed. I would go hide in the closet and cry, and
mhm,
I would just try to breathe and control my breathing, and I didn't know how to handle it. I just was like, go. The anxiousness. I was having anxiety attacks, but nobody knew. And so not until I became an adult that it really started like, oh, that's what it is. And they didn't know how much it's affecting me because I still produced. I would still come out and I'd be, got this. I got the grade done. I finished it. I'm smiling. I'm happy. Nobody would know, but they would almost laugh at me for being in the closet. I wasn't
mhm.
in the closet, but you know what I mean? Hiding
Yeah,
in the closet with my own emotion, because that's where I would go to be alone,
yeah,
and I'm sharing this not to like overshadow it, but to understand like those were the things that with all the love. And you, Vero, my mom and dad, they're so loving, so thoughtful. They listen. Let's talk through it, Mija. I care about you, all that stuff. But yet, like, it was traumatic, and it wasn't always safe there. I
Mm.
wasn't it didn't feel safe for me to admit that I had this emotional, I would call it, like at that point it felt like a weakness, to show them that it was causing me anxiety. Just toughen up. Like, why are you, don't be so like, don't be so dramatic, you know? And I'm like, it's not so dramatic. It's trauma, you know? I almost want to cry. I'm emotional because it was hard, you know, to think about those seasons. And I mean, we're not there anymore, but it was hard. So I don't know.
Mhm.
That's why I describe, I'm asking more about safety.
Yeah. No, no, thank you for sharing that with me too. I didn't know that about you.
Mhm.
So thank you for sharing. But I think I understand. So the examples are helpful for people to understand to relate.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
um, so my mom was very physically abusive, right? She would hit us several times a week, or I'll speak for myself. And I remember growing up with the sense of feeling like there was something wrong with me, that I was responsible for my mom not being okay, for my mom being angry. I grew up kind of like feeling like something was wrong, like I was the problem. And I that was like a that feeling lingered throughout my childhood, and I'm sure I suffered from depression, but I didn't know, like
Mhm.
you said, like I didn't know that language. How do you communicate that? And
Mm.
um you said you wrote a book and your mom read it, and she's like, I don't know. My experience was different. I'll tell you this too. When I tried to have conversations with my mother about that season, it's a very invalidating experience.
Mhm.
She didn't live it that way, and it's not her story.
Mm. Wow. That's really hard because it's one thing to say I'm sorry, and I'm sensitive, and I'm saying I'm sorry I had that happen. But for someone to, and I think that you're speaking to people who experience that. There's a
Mhm.
lot of moms and a lot of dads and a lot of uncles and aunts and teachers and other people say that wasn't how I saw it, and they won't. I think that's so powerful. So what was that like? Like, how did you navigate that if it wasn't validating?
um right. So these are conversations that I've never been able to process with her. These are conversations that I've had to process through therapy and
Mm,
done my part, right? How
mm,
do I heal? How do I forgive? How do I not repeat the cycle?
Yeah.
um, how do I how do I show up differently? And so it's a lot of work that has taken many years, and I'm sure I'm not done.
mm-hmm,
I'm sure I'm not done. And sometimes I wonder, why so much education? Am I still looking for answers? I don't know. Uh, but it's hard. It's hard because you can't, again, boundaries, right? I can't control and I can't force her to show up any differently. And can I still love her even if she doesn't? um and so you're right. In that instance, when she asked for help, then the little Belen, right, the inner child says, wait, wait. I don't know, like, is this okay? Are your kids gonna be okay? Are you gonna be okay? And so yeah, definitely there was that kind of triggering of like, this is unsafe. It's
Mm.
probably not a good idea.
especially if she hasn't been able to, even in conversation, be a safe place. You
Hmm.
know, I think what's challenging in that is sometimes, like, even when we talked about last time, humble yourself, right? That was what we talked about last week. When we talk about humility and humbling ourselves, like, I remember it just feels like, don't tell me to do that if I've already been humbled to the max. I've been fighting my whole life to exist and say that I deserve a space. And you're telling me to slow down and calm down. Like, I'm tired of being calmed down a little. Stop trying to hold me back. And I think the hard thing is, like, it almost feels like a kid having then to still be the grown up, right? Like, I deserve a mom who listens. I deserve this. Wait a minute. I know the logic now. I should be validated. Mom, if anybody in the world is, like, you should be validating me. Like, you should accept this. Like, you're supposed to be the grown up here. And it's hard because she doesn't have that capacity to do that,
Hmm.
right? Like, and accepting. Like, okay, so And Vero, did you want to speak into anything? I'd like to give you an opportunity.
Just she's absorbing.
Yeah, I
If
am.
not, I have a follow-up question, so don't worry.
No, I was just gonna say, I think, because I've had my own set boundaries with my mom, which my mom, and it's not easy. Just alone the Latino, being a Latina, and doing that and being the oldest, and I know like we share that, like being the oldest and then setting that boundary, yeah, and having to set that boundary, like it's hard. It's hard to do that because to an extent, like you become a partner with them, whether even like I know like Rachel, you have your dad, and I know like there was times where he was out of the picture because of you shared in your book, so I don't feel like I'm sharing something that's
My
not.
daddy was in jail.
Yeah.
My daddy went to jail. Why you put my story out there? I'm gonna tell Dad.
It's on Amazon actually. Go pick it up, guys. But but like I didn't have a dad in the picture, so I was like the other partner, and you like unintentionally, because I'm like the oldest, so like you grow up quickly and you got to help and be there and all of that, and it bleeds into adulthood, and like you said, you start learning things and you're like, wait, that wasn't my role, or even some of the things that you experience and realize like you want to be upset at them, but at the same time recognizing they didn't know any better either, or they, like you said, like your mom, like she couldn't have like didn't know what it was that was affecting her, and then you think of like what they went through as children and how that have impacted them, and I remember one time having a conversation with my mom about, because I think I had said something about how I had been hurt growing up or something like that, and she took it really offensively, like you said, like their side of the story looks different than our side at times, and so I remember in trying to validate even her, like I said, like you weren't meant to be a dad, like you were meant to be a mom, you weren't meant to do both roles, you weren't meant to be both mom and dad, of course you weren't going to do that, right? Because that's not what you were meant to do. And somehow that still was like a comment that created offense in her, and I just realized like some of these things I just need to find that healing for myself and process some of these things on my own, and even if it's just a revelation for me to help me now know how to forgive her more and how to give her the grace she needs, and know like it wasn't me, and be okay with that, and knowing that sometimes it's just for my own healing, kind of like when people are like, you have to learn how to forgive even if you never get that apology. It's kind of like that, but I think what I do want to touch a little bit on is, like you said, being able to set boundaries so that you could still show up as a daughter. And I think like that's so, man, that's so deep. Just because it's like part of the wanting not to have boundaries is you want to be a good daughter, right? Like you want to be there as a daughter for your mom. Like you said, like you feel this guilt of like, how is this being a good daughter if I'm not, like the one thing she's asking I can say no to. But if she was there, and like you said, you could have had resentment, or even just like being desensitized to her to the extent that when she does have this moment of really needing you, you're just like, nah, I've been dealing with you for the past month because you've been living here. Don't go cry to somebody else. And that's really the time that she needs you, And so being able to have that discernment that the Lord has been guiding you through this of, I have to say no to this, because when you really need me to say yes, I want to be able to be there to say yes to you. And I think like, I guess I would ask like, how do you do that?
Yeah, I think that was the question. I think it'll go into this. How do you move past the guilt into a place of compassion? Like that's what it seems like is happening. And maybe I'm wrong, because like it seems like, okay, I gotta like not dwell on the guilt that I feel and actually move and be led by compassion. Yeah.
And
If
I
I'm
think even in
specifying.
alignment with that, I'll add a little bit to that. Not like with like not being moved by compassion would be, not being moved by guilt, but by compassion, but also not being moved by your like by any anger or resentment from the past. Because sometimes in the name of I'm setting boundaries or I got to take care of myself, we don't realize we do it in not a loving way. Like, you've hurt me so much, I'm putting up my boundaries now because you've been doing this, this, and this, and this. So here's my boundary, and you can't come any closer than this. And it's not so much so I can show up when you need me to, but it's like I'm tired of showing up, so I need to put this boundary. Like, so how
That
do you
feels
find
different.
that balance between the two of not putting up boundaries because you feel guilty, but then not putting up, but putting up boundaries because you're fed up and you're done with it and you don't want to hear anything from them anymore? Like, how do you balance that, you know?
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I've seen that. I've seen that kind of like, I'm setting this boundary because I'm done with you. I want nothing to do with you, right? And to me, that doesn't speak of healing. It sounds like healing, but it's really not healing. And then
Mm-hmm.
if you think about like a family systems theory, that's cut off, and it's very common to happen again in multiple generations, right? Like my parents cut their parents off, so I cut my parents off, my children cut me off. Like it's a thing that
Mm,
happens in families, right? Like
that's
Mm-hmm.
heartbreaking.
Yeah.
who like who blocks you? Like, who blocks you on social media? Who blocks your phone? Right? Like that's one way to be like, I'm separating myself from you, right? I've seen
Mm-hmm.
it. Um, it's been done to me. It feels awful. I think for me, and moving forward has been a process. Like I said, I think my education has allowed me to learn a lot about my family and myself and how I function. But more than anything, I think it's my convictions of grace and healing and
Mm,
um, what it's not called restoration, reconciliation, right? Like
mhm.
who am I if
Mm-hmm.
I cannot forgive her? Who am I if I cannot show compassion? If I'm walking the walk, I need Jesus to show me how to have compassion and love for her. And when I am setting these boundaries, they need to be for the right reason, right?
Yeah.
And maybe some people are completely abusive and they do need to be cut off because there's no way to continue that relationship. And I understand that. There's cases like that, right? But I don't feel like that's my case. And I really feel it was my convictions and my relationship with God that said, this is the way you have to do it. Yeah, that's what it was. Like that it was part of my healing.
And how did you have that conversation with the Lord? Because it feels like that is like, yeah. How did you navigate that with the Lord? Because it seems easy, but that process is hard.
Yeah, no, it was not easy.
If you were to
It was
say,
not
like, I mean, like, if you could
easy.
just say, like, I just had to go with the grace of the Lord, His compassion, and all that. It is like, because like we hear
I
that
make
in
it
church,
sound really
right?
nice, huh?
No, yeah, we all do. Like, because I can tell you, like, look, me and my mom have reconciled, and we have a beautiful relationship now. We allowed, like, say things like this. We allowed the Lord in.
Uh-huh.
What does that mean? I
We
allowed the
hyper
Lord in.
spiritualize it. Yeah, okay.
Like, yeah, and we do, but it's true because it is hyper spiritual and it is powerful and it is supernatural. It's not just me and
Yeah.
myself, like, and that's the fusion of like this beauty, right? It's like this, like, I need to get therapy because I need to learn these tools, but I also need to submit to Jesus. Like, I need both of these things. I need this,
All of it together,
I need
yes.
it together. I need relation. I need to, because if
Yeah.
not, like you said, I don't want the cutoff. That's what I said. People cut me off all the time, but I don't want the cutoff. I want to be able to say, hey, can we reconcile this? Can we come together? Can we solve, even if that means we don't see each other every day, even
Yeah.
if that means we only talk once a month, or whatever that is, or we avoid certain topics that are going to be offensive. Like, okay, we won't talk about that,
Yeah.
but the
Yeah.
cutoff is crucial. So how did you come back to, like, how did that spiritual side
How did
happen?
I talk to God about it? Was
Yeah, how'd you do that?
it?
What was that like for you?
Well, this is what I have learned from my relationship with God, right? You don't have to fake it, right?
Thank
You don't
you.
need, you don't need to
Yes.
lie to kick it, is what I have understood from being God. You don't need to lie to kick it. Come
You
here
ain't
with
got to lie to kick it.
come here with all that you have. You're angry at your mom. Tell me that you're angry. Like show me what you got. And it was just like that. She did this, she did that. I feel this. I want to do this. But very real, very raw. God is not overwhelmed by my emotions. He can handle
Amen.
them. He can handle my emotions. He's never like, oh my God, Belen, how dare you? Like, no, he's got it. So I can be very real. Like, I do a lot of journaling that kind of helps me get stuff out and process it. I don't filter it. I just write it, right? And part of me writing is just like, okay, I'm giving it to you, messy, whatever comes out. And then throughout the day or throughout the week, he'll speak to me. Someone will tell me something. I'll read something. I'll hear his voice. But he's answering all the things that I gave him
Yeah,
because he's
yeah.
not overwhelmed with my mess. So
That's
I
so
can bring it to him.
that is such a simple and powerful truth. Like I was thinking about it, like, because I have really feel like I have been healed from like depression because
Yeah.
I struggled for years.
Mhm.
But I mean, with like extreme depression, right? And suicide and suicidal thoughts, like not to acting them out. But it was really tormenting for many years. And I just recall like I know I've been freed from it, but it still like tries to jump in when things get hard, right? Like when there's something disappointing or frustrating, it's like, oh, and I just like I found my strategies, like my coping, that are healthy. It includes community, it includes Jesus, and it includes journaling. And it's funny because for me, sometimes like I'm very private about my journals. No, you can't take a piece of paper out of my journal. No, you can't read my journal because Holy Rachel might be like, you know what? I can't stand that. Beep, 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 beep. And I know, and this next page will be all Psalm 91. But like, if I'm frustrated and I'm angry, I don't really cuss that much in my journal. I think it's been only really extreme times when I'm angry, then I feel guilty and I'm like, Lord, I'm sorry, and I cross it out. But like, but I have found myself in a spiral that felt so desperate that I didn't want to keep that in. And I think we have these like, we want to treat God because he's holy and he's honorable. And we've learned that there's reverence before a holy God, that we think we have to put on like, like fancy gloves, or what is it, like special gloves to talk to him. We have to be treat him gently because he can't handle us. Like, and I love that the Bible talks about him being not just our father and our Lord, he's our friend,
Mhm.
and it's all of that makes it special. So I that's like profound and simple. Like he can, and you ain't gotta lie to kick it. Like
You can quote me on that one. Hashtag, you ain't gotta let it kick it. Love
that should
is.
be the title of the episode.
Love
Love is you ain't gotta lie to kick it.
Doctora
um,
Belen.
well, but I don't know. Did you want to speak to that at all, or
No, no, I agree
no?
with all.
It's good though, huh?
No, I I feel like it would just be reiterating the same thing. Like
No
I
worries.
agree, just being honest with the Lord and being raw. Like, and I think it's so simple. It's so simple, and people could be like, oh, but like literally, just be real. And I know, like in those moments, it's probably the closest I felt to the Lord than
Yeah,
other times. It's in the moments where I am in my fully broken self, in the mess of everything and the frustration of everything, and just laying it out before God and crying out to him, like literally crying out, like yelling, like, where are you in this? Like a lot of those moments end up feeling so peaceful afterwards. It's like the peace after the calm, and it just reminds me, like, God's like there, like, as a parent should be at times, like when your child is having a tantrum and everything, then your parent comes, it's like calms it all down and shut, like shushes it, not in a like um disregarding, but in a calming way, like it's okay, it's gonna be okay, I'm here now. And I feel like I've had many of those moments with the Lord right after moments of the chaotic storm that comes with battle sometimes.
that's so good. And I'll actually speak to that just briefly before I ask our final question, and you can share whatever else you want. But it's because we're used to lying. We are used to lying to protect people, to protect ourselves. And I think it's really a dangerous thing. So when we come to approach God, we don't want to tell him how we really feel because we've gotten so accustomed to telling people kind of what we feel to not hurt their feelings. right? Like because they might not validate it if we tell them, right? Like just like what you described, Belen, like they might not be like, oh, mija, really? I had no clue. I love you. I'm sorry. They may not say that.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we approach God, if he's our father, I say father because we put like the same label as our human father on him in a way, you know what I mean? I know he's our father, but we have that same idea. We put that idea on him and we think if I tell him the truth, what if he doesn't accept me? What if he doesn't validate what I'm feeling when I'm talking to him? What if I went too far? And he's like, oh, well, that would have been okay, but now you went too far. How dare you? Now you're going to be blaspheming me and you're going, like we fear that. But I agree with you, Vero. Like it's that when I'm laid out on the floor crying out to God, completely spiritually naked, saying, I'm showing you all the truth. I'm showing you all my cards, God. There's not one area. I'm mad about this, and this. I'm hurt by this, and this. Then we can say, oh, and it feels so good. It feels so freeing. It hurts and it's awkward. I'm like, am I gonna look dumb now? You're gonna answer me? You know?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But Len, if you wanted to share anything else before I ask my last question.
No, I think I'm good.
I have my last question here, and we can talk as much as you want because I want to say thank you first off for that part. Um, it's not easy to share that story, and it's definitely not easy to walk us through the details. And being able to do that for others is so important because it's something I think I didn't even know I needed to hear it. What a blessing it is. Um, so when you think of leaving a legacy of love, what does it mean to you?
You know, I think about that twofold,
Go
actually.
for it. Yeah.
Um, so the first part, and it goes right back to boundaries and keeping it real and having a relationship with God. And when I think about a legacy, I think about owning up to my own stuff, right?
Mm,
The most loving thing that I can do for my family and for my friends and for people around me is to be responsible for the things that I bring to the table,
that's
to make
good.
sure that I'm practicing confession and repentance and continual growth in this progressive sanctification and just showing up for people as the way that they need me to show up and not the way I want to show up only,
Mm,
right?
mm,
So that's one part. And then the second part, and I think it you can tell from like all my life choices, including having a tribe of children, is um, to be someone that helps others nurture their talents and thrive in their purpose. Like I think that should matter to all of us. Like
mm.
how do I help other people? How do I help my children nurture their talents and help them be better people? What are they supposed to be doing in this world, and how can I align with them so that they're successful? How can I serve them in a purposeful way? Um, and I think it, like I said before, it bleeds, right? Like I see that in my children, but I see that in my clients, and I see that in my students, and I see it in my research. And so for me, I think it is about owning up to our own stuff and seeing how we can serve others to be the best that they can be.
That's so beautiful. I think like your second definition is clear, how you lay it all out. We're not completely closed because I have one more follow up for you. When you say owning your own stuff, when you think about this, when you think about having responsibility and owning your stuff, when it came to this dynamic with your mom and this decision, what kind of stuff did you have to own up to, and what kind of responsibility did you have to hold?
Yeah. So for me, it was that parentified savior complex that I can fix it, I can make it better, and wanting to take care of her. So that was my own brokenness. That's a product of my own trauma, right? And she's not
Mm-hmm.
gonna fix that for me, whether she created it or not. No, no, no. She can't fix it. That now belongs to me. And so in that sense, that's the part that I had to deal with. God, how do I get over this complex of trying to save her or parentify her? How do I let go of the responsibility of this?
Mm,
Um,
yeah,
I
that's
think that's
huge.
like, sorry, I think that's just like, it's very, like Rachel saying, it's huge because it makes you take yourself, like, take an outside view of yourself. Like, it's not just focusing on the other person, but now you got to focus on yourself and say, like, what in me needs to be done, like, what, it's like you said, like taking that responsibility of your side of the situation. And it's not always easy in those situations because as human beings, I think we just want to focus on the other person and highlight, like, oh, but I'm the victim here. I'm the one who's been hurt here. I'm the one who, but I think that, but even in that, the Lord is so loving to say, like, hey, but let me show you, and my husband and I were just talking about this week. Like, you come to the Lord with, you're frustrated with this other person, and you come to the Lord, you're like, oh, this person, and God's like, but what about you? And you're like, what about me? I'm perfect. He's like, no. There's some things we need to clean house here, but he's so loving about it. Like, that's the beautiful part, is he's not just like, yeah, what about you? Like, he comes and he's like, I know. But let's look at this first, and it's, I think that's so beautiful that, like you said, it's so important to recognize that part of it.
And I think it's knowing the Father's voice, knowing the heart of the Father and knowing Him. And we get that by spending time with Him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, because I think there have been people who tried to check me and give me direction. And this is not parents per se, but other people. And they tell me, oh, well, look at you. Look at how about you? And I'm like, and I feel bad and I feel condemned. But it's crazy because when the Lord does it, I feel a little bad because I don't like it. But I don't feel condemned. I
Mm.
feel loved. I feel loved. And I think those are boundaries that the Lord has set up, right? He's like, I love you wholly, fully, all of it. But I'm not going to allow you to just be all this favor just so that you can oppress somebody else. Like, I want you free. I want them free. And so he's going to, his voice is gentle and guiding. And that's something that I think we can start to identify in the voice of our Father and say, no, like, hold on. God's telling me this, and this is He's safe. He's
Mm-hmm.
setting up these things so that I can be healthy, so I can love. It's so beautiful, man. Belen, this is such a has been such an amazing conversation. I don't know if you wanted to say anything else in regard to this. I think that you want to leave with us on this topic of love and boundaries because you are just a well of knowledge, and we're honored to have you. Any other thoughts?
No more thoughts. I just want to say thank you so much for having me on here. I was very nervous about coming on, but you guys made it such a comfortable experience, and I'm just so grateful I got to be a part of it.
Yeah, and I think we're honored to have you on so many levels, but you're an important voice in our community. You're an important voice because we as Christians often have a hard time fusing mental health and and our faith, and looking at therapy and saying, hey, it's not the bad guy. They're not going to necessarily pump you up with drugs and make you hate your family. Like, we can find this beautiful space of finding healing and reconciliation. The Lord has given us this wisdom, and so your voice, your face, you speaking of this is so important, and it's such an important conversation. So we honor you and we're grateful to have you. Out with any other thoughts? I
Yeah.
got distracted.
No worries.
I'm just thinking, I'm overwhelmed.
No, just know there's many ways you can get involved here at Until We Arise. So make sure you go to our website. It's www.untilwearise.org, and there's volunteer opportunities, donation opportunities. We have Elia's Run Walk coming up, so make sure you're paying attention to that.
June
And
24th.
June 24th. So make sure you're doing that. Subscribe to our podcast. Make sure you're up to date on all of them. If you've missed any of them, go back, check them out. They've all been super good. And last but not least, until we arise, what won't change in our lives, in our families, in our communities, and in our world? Until we
Until
arise.
we arise. All right. Thank you.